Hi, Sean.
Hi, Danny.
Okay. So, uh, for those of you who are just joining us, we've been getting a few questions. So, Sean and I decided to get together today to answer a few of those questions so that it's a little less confusing.
And maybe give you a whole bunch of new questions afterwards.
As long as none of the questions are about what's behind me, I'm perfectly fine. Okay, so realistically, the first question that we've been getting so far from anybody is, why did we start on episode 65?
I mean, mainly because when we first started this, it wasn't with the intent to post the videos. It was a group of people getting together just to play. I purposely picked a whole bunch of people who have never played Vampire the Masquerade before. So that way, one, I could kind of homebrew some of the rules that make things flow a little bit better for my style of GMing. Uh, but we just then came out of necessity of COVID hit. We weren't allowed to meet in person, but we didn't want to stop playing. So we started using Zoom as a way to at least keep the game going, which, hey, it's been going on for over a year now. So that's pretty cool.
What it's been a year and a half, huh? Because it was
Yeah.
July of 2019.
Yeah.
It was because it was my birthday that week, the week that we
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. So we've been playing for over a year now. And then what happened is one of our players, David, because of work, had to leave early, and because yes, Atris. And because we didn't want him missing out and it was just too difficult to just like share notes and things like that, we started recording as a way for him to review the episodes after he left, as just a way to go. Then we got the idea that you proposed, Danny, actually, of putting them on YouTube. And we had the idea of not wanting to jump in mid mission on like where it would be even more confusing. So 65 just happened to be where it landed, where it was after the completion of the last adventure.
And then what is that? So our last adventure was officially a train heist, which is actually how we started the campaign. In the
I
first
kind of
place.
bookended it a little bit.
Yeah, we did. We bookended. We started with a train heist. We finished a train heist, and then now we've moved on to the next phase, which is the posting to the interwebs and all that stuff.
Yes.
Let's see. Another question that I was getting was, why do we keep saying that we're already dead at the beginning? Do you want to field this one, or is it an easy enough answer for me?
I think it's easy enough for you. I'll let you go with it.
Okay, so we are vampires. We are a Wild West vampire gang. So we do things that are seemingly unscrupulous, but yes, we're already dead because we are vampires. So we're living our best unlife.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that. I know a few people have been asking me because they're not familiar with Vampire the Masquerade. So when they hear you talking about rolling in dice and we say how many successes we have, they're a little confused as to what that means. So what does the dice rolls and what does the amount of successes versus failure mean for us?
So, and we'll go into this a little bit more in another video that we're probably going to put out later, explain the mechanics of the game. Vampire the Masquerade is a game in the larger World of Darkness tabletop series. With your character sheet, you usually have a combination of two different uh, things that are combined together. So, for example, throwing a punch is going to be a Dex plus Brawl roll. When during character creation and through the use of XP, you put X number of, usually ranging from 1 to 5 dots in each of those categories. You add those two numbers together, and that is the amount of dice you can roll. And exclusively in this game, unlike Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, that has a whole different array of different numbered dice, we exclusively use the D10s. And you are given a difficulty rating based on how hard it is for you to do the thing that you're trying to do. That, so if you hear me say something like, oh, standard difficulty, which is anything 6 and above, or if it's something a little bit more difficult, I might say, oh, it's going to be diff 8. If it's something that should be really easy for you because you're a vampire, oh, it's only going to be like diff 4. Basically, at that point, the people roll the number of dice that they have dots in those combination of two abilities. Anything that hits that difficulty level or is better than it is counted as a success. Now, where it varies a little bit from anyone that's following along with the core book is I have it where a 1, which is known as a botch, subtracts from successes. In the book, it's you have to have no successes and then roll a 1 on top of it in order to botch, but that never happens. And
This is news to me.
it's actually not. I actually warned you guys about this when we first met. You just forgot.
A year and a half ago. Yeah, no.
How dare you not have this be in the forefront of your mind? Damn it, Danny, you had one job. But no, that almost never happens. And part of the fun of a game is the chance of failure. And if the chance of failure almost never happens, there's no risk-reward balance for anything. So 1s in my system subtract from successes. If you have more 1s than successes, that's a botch. And depending on what level botch it is, depends on how bad it is that something happened. Also in my version, a 10 explodes. So if you have a 10, it actually, you get to re-roll that die for another chance of additional successes or potentially more botches. And if you have a specialty, aka 4 or more dots in a given category that you have had a specific area of expertise in, that 10 is actually going to count for 2 successes in addition to the reroll.
I unfortunately feel like I'm learning more about how the game actually works.
Cool. We're experts at this point. We got it down.
But I love our world. It's like this, because I think what I always laugh about is when you see vampires in any media platform, they either go very modern or they always kind of harken back to the Victorian era, and it's lovely, but you very rarely get something in between. And the fact that we're doing Wild West vampires and we can never have a shootout at high noon just makes me laugh.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about it is we're actually in the Victorian era, but every time someone does that, you're always looking at Victorian London or Victorian England in some way. This is the same. And what I actually found really interesting that I didn't realize until I started doing research for this game is a lot of what we think of the Old West and the Wild West hasn't even happened yet. It was really only the last 30 years of the 1800s. So like from 1870 on, when we think of things like the OK Corral shootout and Jesse James and all those big names that we remember, even the invention of the Colt, the Colt pistol wasn't until the later half of the 1800s. Before that, we're talking more like the wagons going out west kind of deal.
Well, what's funny is that if you look in any historical facet, what those eras are known for always ends up being the end of those eras.
Yeah.
It's like, just when we think about the 60s, that came at the end.
Yeah, it's always the tail end of, or even sometimes when it's, I mean, hell, you look at the 90s and the first 4 years of the 90s, they forgot that the 80s, like a lot of the 80s styles that when you think of things like Saved by the Bell, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like what they're wearing,
Acid
it's
wash
really
side ponytails, like the scrunchies.
Yeah, like all of that was like late 80s, early bleeding into the early 90s. So it's kind of the same thing of this game of when I was doing research. Because for those following along at home, one of the fun aspects of Vampire the Masquerade is that you can drop it into any time in history, because the game's been around since I believe the 70s was when the first version of the game came out, I want to say. If not, it was either the 70s or the 80s that the first version of the game came out.
We will have our fact checker Miranda find that out.
Yes. And so because of that, there's decades of writing and different versions of this game and source material. And so because of that, they've programmed it such that you can really drop a story into any place in the world, any time in the world, and you're able to look at what vampires were up to at that time.
Very nice. No, and granted, we've been playing for a year and a half, and I'm still having an unbearable amount of fun. I mostly just laugh that it's because what especially some of the ways that we've been playing is that we have like this difference of morality, and it kind of like makes us question like, okay, am I a human? Am I a vampire? Do I get to play both?
It's very much even the core book has a reference guide for people that want to read up on what it's like to be a vampire. And one of the things they reference is Anne Rice's, interview with a vampire and all of that. And really, she was one of the first ones that started to look at the morality of this concept of self for a vampire. Am I a human? Am I a monster? Am I some evolved form of humanoid that is better than those who are not? And the game really has a mechanic that plays on that of there's that fine line between letting go of your humanity and then giving into this bestial creature that you could become
and we have
lose your sense
determined
of personality.
Liam is letting go of his humanity.
It's a road, but yeah, getting back to the dice, I mean, the fun thing about the dice is part of the aspect of the game, like any tabletop game, is your personal choices. Okay, I'm going to attempt to do this. I'm going to avoid doing this. This is what I'm going for, and coming up with that, and not being pigeonholed into only one way to play. However, the dice add that level of unexpected randomness that life has in the real world, of that the best laid plans of mice and vampires can oft go astray. And so it leaves that element of you could have the best plan in the world that you spent 3 sessions, working out, and then one unlucky dice roll means that you have to think on your feet because, oh shit, your cowboy just became unconscious, is getting dragged behind a train.
Well, I think it's probably one of the best examples of just like the tropes of improv, of yes and. The dice dictate whether we fail or succeed, and then you have to go with it. You can't just sit there and re-roll until you get the outcome that you want. It's like, no, we failed, and or we succeeded, and we're going to move on from there.
And honestly, I think there's this giant fear. I know a lot of people, whether you're playing D&D or the multitude of other tabletop games that are out there, there's this concept that you can win the game. And I think that people that go into that, whether you're the dungeon master or the player, they go into that and you're never going to have fun if that's your mentality, because unlike a board game or a video game, the point of these type of games is collective storytelling. And it's getting back to really the roots of humanity, of that most primitive form of entertainment being telling a story. And what I always hearken it to is it's a more fun version of those old choose your own adventure books that they used to have, where, oh, if you decide to go left, turn to page 12. If you decide to go right, turn to page 34. It's a story that you're telling that you have a sliver of control of how the story is told, and then the rest of it you just have to react to. And it's just one of those things of it's never going to be the same game twice, and you win by keep playing. You like I told you guys from the beginning, there's a very real chance of character death. A character can just have a bad night and meet their final demise, but it doesn't mean that the player has to stop playing. We can roll up a new character.
And prior to us posting, we've had, I think, 2 very, very close instances of, because I know Liam was one, and then Walter most recently during the train heist.
And then Sonoy, literally your first session, like Wea's companion there almost died session 1.
So since he was brought up, actually, Sonoy, for those who, because Sonoy has not been very prominent in the game these last few sessions. Sonoy is a wolf that actually travels with one of our characters, Wea, and is actually bound to him as a ghoul. So, Sean, can you explain to us what ghouls are? I know we have 3 in game right now. We've got Sonoy, we have Bartleby, and then we have our newly ghouled person, which is Inspector Marshall.
Yes. So in the world of vampire, ghouls are blood-bound servants to a vampire. They can be human or they can be an animal. The way that they're created is that the vampire gives the being a little bit of their blood to ingest every night for 3 nights in a row. And if they do that, the person is then blood-bound to them. Damn near impossible for them to disobey a direct command. It is possible because they still have free will. It's just very difficult for them to disagree with their master. Once they become a ghoul, they usually are stronger than the average creature of their variety. From a playing aspect. Their stats usually get a bit of a boost. And they also stop aging as long as they still become a ghoul. They can stop being a ghoul if they have not ingested vampiric blood, otherwise known as vitae, for over a year. Now, it doesn't have to be from their master. There have been cases in the history of vampire of a ghoul betraying their master and going and serving someone else. But it's something that vampires usually will hold over a ghoul's head if they think about disobeying of, hey, you've actually been a ghoul for 100 years. If I choose not to feed you, all that aging is going to catch up as soon as it's been a year since they've ingested vitae, and the aging happens instantaneously. So, if you've only been a ghoul for a couple years, not a big deal. If you've been a ghoul for 50 plus years, it might not be a great night for you.
It creeps up on you a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when we started playing the game, the person who is now Atris actually came in as Bartleby and was actually a ghoul that we had, and we actually gave him that character because he wasn't able to play consistently. So this kind of gave him an excuse, and he's actually bound to Liam. This way we can kind of have him come and go as our player actually needed. And this way it wasn't
Especially since ghouls are...
Yeah, and because one of Liam's abilities is to summon anyone he's ever met, he could just constantly call Bartleby back. So Bartleby just now kind of exists in the background a bit, which is lovely because he's been very, very handy to have at times.
It's nice having someone that can go out during the daylight hours, and which, for the record, is what one of the main benefits of ghouls is. They are often used as daytime guardians and protectors of their masters, so that way they have some kind of security so someone can't just stake you during the dawn.
And one of the biggest differences for anyone who's just curious, we have a character sheet and stats for Bartleby because he was being played by a player. When it comes to Sonoy, our character Wea actually does play Wea and then also plays his wolf Sonoy. So we actually have Sonoy there for a lot of our combat and is with us far more often than any of the other ghouls that we have.
Mm.
This is always good to know.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he's especially for the type of vampire that Wea is, having an animal companion is a very expected thing.
Yep, and Sonoy does not like everyone.
I mean, it's still a wolf. Like, he's still a big timber wolf. Which is also why you guys will probably not see him very often when the group is going into town and things like that, because Wild West or not, most people aren't going to take kindly to a giant wolf walking down the middle of the street. We've all seen Balto. We know how this ends.
Sean, I'm just going to point this out because I just noticed it and it's bothering me. You and I did not plan to coordinate color schemes.
Today's episode has been brought to you by the color burgundy.
So, okay, I have that. Right now we are playing weekly unless we have scheduling conflicts or unless, we have a player that is just not available. Or holidays we definitely do take off because, we want to spend time with our families. But what are some of the things besides just the mainstay games that we are going to be rolling out for anyone watching?
Well, for everybody at home, we will be having individual player backstories. Basically, this is going to be each player is going to record what happened before the game started for us. So their lives as human before they became vampire, how they became a vampire, what got them to the part where the group got together, which is originally was known as the Obsidian Six Spurs because there were 6 players initially. Now you guys have referred to yourself just as the Obsidian Spurs. So how did they join this Wild West vampire game as a character? And you'll get to hear that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. They'll give you a better idea of who the characters are that you're seeing each week. We're also going to do the trail thus far, which is going to be explaining a summary of the plot from session 1 till session 64. So that way anybody coming in, you'll understand what got everybody to that point.
Now, for anyone who's curious, please comment, send us messages. We do have some of the previous content recorded, and it is available. But it was something where we didn't have an opening, we didn't have a closing quite yet, and so we wanted to refine some things, those things, and we were in the middle of a story arc. So if you're interested in some of the previous content, let us know. We can see about making a short playlist with maybe the train heist that we had just beforehand. It's just gonna be a little bit more choppy, and definitely a lot of us. We lose track a lot.
And lastly, for anyone who is not familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, one, I highly recommend it. It's a great game to get involved in. It's a pretty easy game to learn to play. There's with it only having a single type dice set, it's really easy to figure out your roles. It's not doing a whole bunch of math and everything else. Get yourself a copy of the core book. You can even get a digital version on drivethroughrpg.com. We'll put a link in here for that. But we're also going to release me explaining a little bit of, we'll have one video that will just be going into a little bit more in depth about the mechanics of how the character sheet breaks down and how the roles break down. But then the rest of it will be like I did for my players who were all newbies to the universe to start with. I'll explain the history of vampires, the history of how they work in this universe, and also just this game specifically about what's going on with vampires in America at this time period, what it's like. And that way everyone will get a much firmer concept of at least my rendition of this universe.
Oh, you know what? Actually, because it hasn't been mentioned in game yet, we actually haven't mentioned what our setting is.
That's true.
We're so currently we are in Indian territory, which will eventually become Oklahoma. But
I didn't pick the name, guys. I didn't pick the name. It's just what history says.
We looked up. We're doing homework, which I am mad at you about.
Yeah.
But Sean, where does the game actually take place for the mainstay of it?
For the mainstay of it, it's going to take place in southeast Texas during 1865. So very much an interesting time. It's just post-Civil War. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on both with the humans and the vampires at this time, which again, one of those videos that I release will be talking about current events and what that means for both humans and vampires. It should also be noted for people who are confused at home that in this universe, there are groups of humans that do realize that the supernatural does exist.
Do they drive around in an Impala carriage?
Yes, absolutely. But for the most part, I would say 95, 99% of humanity is blissfully unaware that the supernatural exists, or at the very least have the same level of belief that people in our world do. So same percentage of people who believe in ghosts and the paranormal and stuff like that here believe in it in this use. They're just a small fraction of people that know better. So the reason that the game is called Vampire the Masquerade is that for the most part, vampires are trying to mask their existence. They're trying to not let the majority of the human world realize that they are alive.
Okay, I'm good. I'm ready.
Perfect. Perfect.
Do I look vampiric yet?
Very. We'll call you Clark.
I mostly just don't want to know why I just knew that I had that right there.
Well, I mean, it is your room, so hopefully you know where your things are.
But other than that, we are posting games every Sunday. But that's when they're coming up. The only reason we won't post is if we didn't have a game that week. But we are going to try and have in-between content so that if we don't have a game coming, we at least have something that we can post. But please, everyone, like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell, get notifications. For us, this has just been definitely mental health. During the pandemic, we haven't been able to see anyone physically, and so this has just been our best way to get through it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for me, it's not only therapeutic, but this was kind of a passion project for me. I came up with the concept of this particular campaign about 2 years ago, prior to our first session. And it sprung from a, oh my god, what about vampires in the Old West? And funny enough, the World of Darkness actually recently released a book for Old West vampires, which maybe would have been super useful if they had that at the time that we had started. But
how dare they?
Right, they did just spite me. Unless they want to, like, sponsor me, then I love them, and they always had my back.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, push, push.
But yeah, so besides it just being really therapeutic as a way to stay in touch with, because all of us were friends before we started playing, it just was a way for our friends to get together and hang out. And this has definitely been a great way to continue that and have something to look forward to each week. It's actually really funny, when we started coming up with the idea of playing, we were kind of looking at our schedules and going, okay, well, let's play every other week. We don't want to get too crazy about this. We don't want to get burnt out on the game.
We'll ease into it.
Yeah, we're not sure, because since none of you guys had played before, we're not sure if you're going to like it, and it might not be your thing. I think we got done with session 1, and you guys all came to me and it's like, so, you got any more of them vampires? Like, can we play every week?
And then on top of that, we have our own conspiracy theories and fan theories for you that we just keep sending your way.
Oh, I bet this is happening. This is what's going to happen. It's like, I like that we are both not only the people playing, but we are also our own fans. Like, we're also sitting there going, oh my god, wasn't that awesome? Because after we stop recording, we then spend about 20 minutes fanning out about what just happened and your guys' fun predictions about what's going to happen next. And I'll admit that there's been 1 or 2 times where you guys come up with, oh, I bet this is totally going to happen next. And I'm like,
sure,
yes, sure. That was always what was going to happen.
You're a thief. But thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate you getting together with me today. Hopefully this gives you guys a lot of information to get you guys started. We really love this world that we're playing in. If you guys want to join us in our sandbox, we would really appreciate it. All in all, have fun, just be weird, and was it keep your fangs and your wits sharp?
Keep your fangs and your whip sharp.
All right, Sean, I will talk to you later, and I will see you at game.
Bye, everybody.